Today we'll learn about life aboard the Mayflower of 1620. I'm your trainer, Lori Coffey. So who is traveling? The first group of planters are part of the faction known as the Saints, who escaped to the Netherlands to start their own church. Remember, they've been there together as a group for 10 or more years, but they want their children to be English, not Dutch. Starting over in the New World is very appealing. What kind of a life do the Saints have in the Netherlands? Lots of work, getting married, having kids. English professor and publisher of seditious books is William Brewster, the spiritual leader of the travelers, who brings his wife Mary and their two youngest sons, Love and Wrestling. Plus, they are responsible for two young wards assigned to them. Their daughters Patience and Fear follow their oldest brother Jonathan on future ships. Current weaver and future governor William Bradford brings his wife Dorothy, but tragically leaves their 4-year-old son Jonathan behind on the dock, presumably with her family. Isaac Allerton, a tailor, brings his very pregnant wife Mary, plus their 3 children, Bartholomew, Remember, and Little Mary, plus an apprentice and servant. Isaac is a natural leader and starts the fishing industry in New England when he finally gets some hooks. Hatter Deggery Priest plans for his wife Sarah, who is Isaac Allerton's sister, and their 2 daughters, Mary and Little Sarah, to follow later. Fabric merchant Thomas Rogers brings his teenage son Joseph, but leaves his wife and 3 younger children to follow later. These are just a few of the first passengers slated to travel to the New World. When it's time to leave, they have to say goodbye to those they are leaving behind. Eyewitnesses wrote that they were not able to speak for the abundance of sorrow, sobs, and prayers. Once the Saints board the ship, on the land, their pastor, John Robinson, falls to his knees, followed by the rest who are left behind. The Saints leave on July 22nd, 1620, but where do they leave from? This port. What port? Somewhere on this map? Of course, the Netherlands, Delfshaven to be precise. They are aboard the Mayflower, right? No, they decided to buy a 43-year-old bargain basement ship of their own, captained by a Mr. Reynolds. The small ship had fought in the Spanish Armada in the 1588 sea battle. They thought it would be useful to have one to stay in the colony for trade and fishing, which makes sense. Her name, originally called Swiftsure, she is now Speedwell, but is neither speedy nor well. Fun fact, Speedwell's painting is featured on the $10,000 bill. Did you know there was a 10,000? I've never, does anybody have one? I'd like to see it. I'd like to borrow it. Printed in 1918, only 5 are known to exist today. Around that time, the Mayflower leaves from the London Pool Docks area, known as the Legal Quays, ruled by greedy officials. Mayflower carries the second faction of planters, known as the Strangers, because the Saints don't know them at all. Who are they? Remember the adventurers? They are looking for more people to help plant the new colony and buy tickets for the voyage, since the Saints have very little money. Buy a one-way ticket with cash or 7 years' labor and get 200 acres of land. By the way, it turns out to be only 1 acre and hard labor, but the Strangers are happy to get it. The Strangers are all religious too, and new evidence reveals that they too are leaving the Church of England, that they were already rebels. That's new information. Most are merchants in London. Like the Saints, some of them know each other and are even related. Let's look at the Stranger's life. We already heard about William Mullins, the shoemaker, and his daughter Priscilla. Weaver and bachelor Peter Brown, who brings that giant beer tankard, but is more famous for bringing his giant mastiff. Did you imagine that dog on the Mayflower? Tanner Stephen Hopkins brings his very pregnant wife Elizabeth and little daughter Damaris, plus his 2 teenagers, Constance and Giles, from his first marriage, and 2 servants. Stephen is the only passenger who's been to the New World before. His experience with the natives proves to be invaluable. We'll hear more about him later. Merchant John Billington, the first Pilgrim ancestor I discovered, brings his wife Eleanor and teenage sons John Jr. and Francis. Inquisitive, outspoken, and adventurous, The entire family clashes with Pilgrim leadership and their saintly lifestyle. These next planters do not pay for the voyage, they are paid to take the trip. They have been hired by the adventurers to help the new colony. House carpenter Francis Eaton brings his wife Sarah and baby Samuel. Bachelor and cooper John Alden, he makes barrels and the racks to hold them. John Alden is hired by his cousin, Master Jones, to protect the valuable cargo of victuals, much to the joy of Priscilla Mullins. Do you know that story? The courtship of Miles Standish. Soldier, there he is, Miles Standish is hired to train the pilgrims on warfare. He brings his wife, Rose. The Mayflower and the Speedwell meet up in Southampton. They have to patch up the Speedwell, which has been leaking. Plus, this is a famous port for buying supplies. John Alden and Stephen Hopkins join them there, and at the last minute, they acquire their spiritual leader, William Brewster, who has been in hiding. Rich, educated, and holy, William and Mary Brewster were the first pilgrims and the power couple. Under the cover of darkness, still in England, they invited John Robinson and other dissident ministers to their home, Scrooby Manor, to teach. People came from miles around to listen, like 12-year-old orphan William Bradford, whom Mary and William take in to raise and protect. He follows them to the Netherlands. In Leiden, Elder William, with the help of young Edward Winslow, publishes a book that's critical of the Church of England, which makes him a wanted man by the spies of the church. He's been on the lam in England for 2 years, and look what he brings. Books! When he dies, he has more books than the endowment that will start Harvard. Like me, he's an avid fan of lifelong learning. The business of moving to a new world and starting a new civilization will not be easy. He says we have much to learn and none to teach us. But on the more practical side, he brings goats, pigs, and chickens, protein that will be critical in the first year. Soup from those chickens will even nurse their friend, Chief Massasoit, through a dangerous illness. Another fun fact that most Floridians should know, all the sailing ships to the New World brought pigs. Did you know that? In fact, buccaneer means roaster of meat, and every wild pig in America is a descendant of sailing ship pigs. Another fun fact. I love fun facts. In addition to the barnyard animals and Peter Brown's Mastiff, John Goodman brings a Springer Spaniel for hunting. In England, dogs are not allowed to be owned by anyone but nobility without a special permit. These are special dogs. 90 passengers aboard Mayflower and 30 aboard Speedwell leave together from Southampton's West Quay. Speedwell has started leaking again, but they can find no holes. They return to Dartmouth port and try to repair it. Every time they leave a port, the English harbor masters charge taxes to feather their own beds, taking the most valuable and easy to steal goods from the ships. There goes most of the cooking butter. Again, the two ships leave. 300 miles from Land's End, the distress flag is hoisted again. The smaller ship has become a sieve. The Speedwell cannot be trusted to cross the Atlantic. They return to the port at Plymouth and forget the Speedwell. What caused the Speedwell to leak? Well, there are various theories. I like this one, so you're going to hear this one. Speedwell was a small ship for traveling short distances, that's true. Therefore, she had a short mast. But to be able to cross the blustery Atlantic, she needed more sails, and that meant a taller mast. She was fitted with one by the world-renowned master shipbuilders in the Netherlands. But that taller mast, fastened to the bottom of the ship, served as a lever. In port, all the side slats were normal. But when the wind cut her sails, the lever twisted the slats, which opened them like floodgates at sea. Was this an accident? By the world-renowned master shipbuilders in the Netherlands? Hardly. Now, some stories say the captain, Mr. Reynolds, didn't want to take such a long voyage, but why bother taking the gig at all if he didn't want to go? Plus, it was easy money, a one-way trip, and a free cruise back on the Mayflower. William Bradford, according to his grandkids, thought it was their friends, the Dutch authorities. They certainly had the opportunity and the means, but what motive? Did you know that the Dutch government had asked the Pilgrims to settle their new colony for the Dutch instead of for the English? But the Pilgrims wanted to stay English, and they said, nay. So this theory says the Dutch tried to delay their success until a Dutch colony could be planted there in Amsterdam, New Amsterdam. It was planted just 4 years later and never amounted to much. Just New York City, the center of the world's economy. It was kind of a thing. Another fun fact, after the Mayflower left, the Speedwell was refitted with a smaller mast and proved seaworthy, making many voyages, including in 1635 to bring supplies to Jamestown. So it crossed the ocean. Now that they've lost one ship, there's not enough room for all. 20 passengers, like their agent in London, Robert Cushman, and his son Thomas, head back to the Netherlands. He didn't want to go anyway. Those who press on buy new provisions and combine into the Mayflower. Have you ever had to combine? No social distancing.